This is Sean with Voices of Vaughn. I'm here with Robert Baker. Robert, you go by Bob?
Yes.
Looks like it's your birthday in the background with your...
My bridge club done that for me last year.
And you're turning 100 in like a month. Is that right?
True.
So since my first question, I was thinking about this earlier. Since your birthday is on the first of the year, and the night before is always a big celebration for New Year's Eve, did you like having it be the day right after New Year's Eve, or was that an issue because everybody was doing all these other things and not being able to celebrate with you on your birthday?
It wasn't important to me because it come too close to Christmas, and my family was very poor, and they didn't have a whole lot of time to do the things that I wanted to do.
And let's talk about your so your parents were Charles and Sarah.
That's right.
And let's talk about Charles' parents. What were Charles' parents' names?
Yeah. And my grandmother, I believe they were from England and Scotland. And I stayed at their house a few times. They didn't have electricity. This little house is in West Newton, Indiana. And I enjoyed doing a lot of things with them. They sort of guided me when I was a kid.
What was his industry?
Beg your pardon?
What was his industry? What was his job or industry?
He was a carpenter.
He was a carpenter?
Yes.
And then your mother, Sarah, what was her parents' names, your grandparents on Sarah's side?
Pollard.
Okay.
And she was from Kentucky.
And what did they do? What was their industry?
In Kentucky, her father was a policeman.
Okay.
And I don't know much about the other parts of the family.
Okay. So you lived in West Newton, and then your father also was a chef and worked at the Pendleton Reformatory?
Yes.
What do you have any stories about him telling you stories about working there at the Reformatory?
Oh, yeah. It was a lot of fun there. And I worked there a month to get some training because they wanted me to be sent down to General Hospital to control inmates, the ones that had to go for surgery. And one thing I did there at the hospital was I took the girls under the tunnel from the hospital to their boarding house. And I enjoyed visiting with a lot of the interns and the doctors.
Okay.
Because they had me for dinner. I worked from 4 till midnight. And about 11:30, the kitchen would bring up a cart and have all the stuff in there to eat. And one of the times I was back there in my department, and one of the doctors came out and said, "Hey, you might as well come over because we got more food we can ever eat, and you're welcome to do that." So I said, "Okay." And I became acquainted with a couple of doctors and a couple of interns. And one time they said, "Hey, we'd like for you to come along and make a visit with our doctor to see some patients."
Okay.
And these young doctors, they had patients that were younger, and they liked to talk to them and find out what they were doing.
And how old were you when this was going on? In high school or?
No, it's when I got out of the Air Force. I was looking for something to do.
Gotcha.
And this job occurred to me, and it was exciting because I got to know a lot of hospital people. And I ran the elevator one time when their people didn't show up, and it was quite an experience.
All right, so I want to go back a little bit, back to your grade. What was the grade school you went to?
I went to one in north of here, for 3 years. And then for some reason they removed me to West Newton.
Okay.
And I think I was about the 5th grade when I went to West Newton.
And then in high school, you came up to Indy, and you lived a few different spots. You lived on Illinois Street, Kansas City Street, and Livingston Avenue
Right.
by the IMS.
Right.
So Manual High School, was that when you were on Kansas or Livingston, or when did you?
South Illinois Street.
That was South Illinois.
Yeah.
And when you were getting involved, I know that you got to spend some time at IMS, and your father did as well.
Yes.
So tell me a little about some of the memories you have of your father and his involvement being a chef, because he was a chef at IMS.
Later on, he was a chef.
So what's the beginning of that?
He started out as a job being a yellow shirt and come back and forth. And he used to bring some of the old drivers over to our home. He lived on Livingston Street over for dinner.
Okay.
And he knew a lot of the old drivers.
Like, name some of them. Like, who are some of those old guys? Do you remember him? We talking AJ? We talking before AJ? We're talking AJ, way before that. Excuse me. So who were some of the, because I mean, I believe it was noted that he was 1911, 1912 when he first, and that was right when it started. Mm-hmm. That's like the first year, right? I believe it was. So how did he get connected to that so quickly at the beginning?
He was a friendly guy, and he'd get acquainted with all the guys pretty easy. And he thought it'd be a good job for me to look at. And I went out and talked to them, and they said they would have me to work at the fair as a speedway track when they needed me. So one time they put me in charge of Gate 1 on over 16th Street.
Okay.
And I was in high school at the time. And I got out there to report, and they had a couple of old service guys there that have been there for a long time. They says, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." I said, "I'm your boss." I had a tag. They're
like, "You're too young." And you're like, "No, I'm your boss."
Yeah. So we used to have a lot of people trying to come in the main gate on 16th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the groups was a motorcycle group. It was about 30 or 40 motorcycles parked right there by the front gate waiting the chance to go in. I thought, oh, hell, this is going to be a mess. So I figured, well, I'll go out and collect all the tickets. When they open, I can shoot them right in there rather than take them one at a time. I'd been there for a couple hours with all the motorcycles. Yeah. We had a lot of fun that day.
So describe the track? Physically describe the track. Like how, obviously it was a big oval. There were bricks.
Yeah.
Like what other aspects of the track could you describe?
Well, it had 4 turns on corners, and it had pretty good straightaways between the corners. Front straightaway and the back straightaway. And when I was a kid on Livingston Street, I used to go through the golf course and go into the speedway the back way. And one race day, they had a bridge over the track. And I just climbed up the bridge, and I was watching the race go on. And there was a news guy there. And he said, "You're not supposed to be up here." And I said, "Well, you're here." And he said, "All right." And he says, "I want you to be careful. Don't fall off of the bridge." Because I was laying down looking at the track. And then eventually I went across over up to the concession stand. And I was always trying to make a little money. And the concession guys got me and says, "Hey, if you want to go around the track and for the seats you collect the empty Coke bottles, I'll give you a quarter for every 24 Coke bottles you bring me. So I'm going around all these old stands. There's Coke bottles everywhere. It's pretty easy. I end up with maybe $2 or $3 in there.
And so that, just to pause on that, $2 or $3 back then would have been equated to how much now?
10 to 12.
10 to 12. So 10 times the amount of what. Okay.
But I was up in the grandstand one for the first turn, and there was a young guy there who was about my age, and he had a pineapple. He said, "You want some of this pineapple?" I said, "Sure, I'll try some of that." And he said, then some cars went by the track, and he said, "See that car there?" I said, "Yeah, I see it." He said, "That's the guy. That's my father, and he's going to win the race." And damn if he didn't win the race.
And who was it?
Oh, I can't remember the name now. I'm familiar with the troop of the car. And I remember the car had a radiator, looked like a little heart.
Now, these were the two-seaters, right?
Oh, yeah.
See, that's what a lot of people don't realize, that back in the day, you'd have a mechanic that would climb onto the car as it's racing.
That's right.
And fix things. So talk about that for a little bit, because that's amazing that existed.
Well, I had a good friend that worked for me when I worked for General Motors, and he happened to be a riding mechanic.
Guy.
And he was an interesting guy, and told me about a lot of because they had to kind of watch for cars, see how position they were, when to pass and when to slow down. He was quite a bit older than me, naturally, but he knew all the drivers and had ridden in their cars with them, and it was a fun story.
Were there some of the drivers that you became fans of? Do you remember who?
Wilbur Shaw was one.
Who was it?
Wilbur Shaw.
Wilbur Shaw.
Yeah. He won the race a couple of times, I think.
Okay.
And I had one guy that was fastest driver on the track. And I used to like him because in the old days, they used to get behind the pit area. They had a little stretch of ground, and they had a softball field there. And I'd go to watch the softball, pick up the foul balls and throw them back. And I enjoyed that.
So in comparison, like the stands, obviously the stands are all over the track now. Yeah. So was it just right next to the pagoda? Was that where majority of them were?
Yeah, along the main stretch.
Main stretch.
Yeah. They were old dilapidated stands, and I never liked to watch it from the stands. I'd go back in the infield, and get near a turn, and watch them come around, see how they're doing.
What was your favorite turn to watch?
Turn two.
Turn two.
Because it was probably one of the most dangerous turns, and guys were trying to get the right position on the car to make the turn, or else they're going to scrape up against the outwall.
Did you see a couple years ago when that tire came off and flew in between turn two tower and the stands, and it could have killed if it would have gone right in between that.
Yeah.
It hit a car in the parking lot. Still didn't even hit anybody in the parking lot. So they're always lobbying to try to get out and then get on the straightaway to 3 and gun it.
That was quite a place to watch. A friend of mine was he was a driver of the safety car leading the race, and they'd go about two or three rounds, and the pace car would pull into the infield, and the race would be on. And this guy was he was a businessman. And I knew him, but he crashed into the stand with the old car, with the car he was driving. And 4 or 5 people got hurt. And he crashed into the stands. He was going too fast. He didn't get stopped.
So you got to see a decent amount of wrecks.
Oh, yeah.
And the, back then there wasn't a lot of protective,
No.
bars going over the top
No.
or everything. So there's a lot more fatalities
It's amazing
because of that.
when they see him now, what all the stuff they put on him to make him safety.
And so when did Clark Gable visit the track, and how old were you when that situation happened?
Well, I was it was after the war, and I think I was going to Butler,
Okay.
and I started an ROTC program at Butler.
Yep.
Since I was a veteran, the guy called me and said, "Would you come over and help me teach these guys about things?" And one day I got a telephone call. I'm not sure who it was from now, but they said, "Hey, Mr. Baker, I'd like for you to pick up Clark Gable at the hotel on North Meridian Street and drive him around, show him Butler University, and then have lunch with him, then take him out to the Speedway," because he was trying to make a car a movie.
Right.
I forget the name of it, but it was a good deal because he turned out to be a perfect gentleman and very talkative. And I got acquainted with him pretty well.
So I do want to, I don't want to jump forward too much, but in your high school, and you said you had jobs that I also got notes. You sold newspapers, apples. You worked as a pharmacist assistant.
Oh, yeah.
So working those different types of jobs, obviously you always stayed very busy.
That's right. I like to be busy. I didn't want to be hanging around the drugstore or my living room. I'd get into everything that come along.
And you're pretty good in school.
I was the third highest in high school. In final, there was a girl that won first place, and I was third highest, and I got a 4-year scholarship to any college I wanted to go to.
Any college.
Any college.
That's amazing. And you started in, was there an honor society that you helped start?
Yeah, it's called Roy Nez Group. It was an exclusive group. I said, "How did they get the name?" He said, "It spells seniors backwards." And I was president of that.
So what was the purpose? It was social and scholastic, but what did you guys do with the group? Would you just, what did you try to solve as a group?
As any problems in the high school?
Give me some examples of things you.
Well, a lot of kids cut classes, and we tried to teach them. If you want to get something out of this class, you got to attend and listen, take notes. And I had a job in the high school cleaning up the chemical lab where they're teaching chemistry, and I think I got $14 a month for working after school with that cleaned up. And they were going to have something to teach. I'm supposed to bring their material on the teacher's desk, so he knows what was going on.
So sports.
Yeah.
What'd you play?
I played basketball. Played basketball for 4 years at Butler, and when I had a couple of teachers that was quite interested in what was going on. And I had one teacher, was a math teacher, and I went into class one morning. He said, "I got news for you, kids. My wife just had a pair of young boys, and they were all state guys that went to the state finals. The two brothers. I can't remember the name right now, but we always had a horrible place to park. But I only lived about 6 blocks from the school.
Okay.
When I got my first car,
What was your first car?
the Studebaker
All right.
Rockney Studebaker.
Okay.
It was about a 1932 model or something. And I used to drive it to my high school, and I'd park it in with the teachers. And pretty soon, somebody reported that I'd been parking in a teacher's lot, and I was the only one driving the car. So I said, well, I'll look for another place to park, because I went to high school for 4 years without any leaves. I never missed a day in 4 years.
That's pretty amazing.
I did.
So where did you guys all hang out in town, in the area? Where did you and your friends hang out in Indianapolis or within that area?
We'd go down to Shapiro's store, and we'd get something to eat.
Yeah.
And a few of the boys got interested in going to the pool room across on Meridian Street. And
Like downtown?
you could pay your.
Was it downtown?
No, it was right in our neighborhood.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And they'd like to go over, and I said, okay, we'll go over and play pool. I never played pool in my life, but I learned, and we used to have a game. We'd all throw in a quarter, and somebody would get their ball, take it, and they'd owe a quarter. If nobody done that, at the end of the game, we'd find out we played 9 ball, and I'd get the pot, which would be 3 quarters.
What could you buy with 75 cents?
Well,
What was it? What was like the ratio to items that would get you?
Shapiro's restaurant. I took a job at the neighborhood drugstore.
Okay.
And I used to wait on all the customers, stock all the merchandise, and I was kind of in charge of the drugstore part. And the owner was an older guy. He stayed back where he filled prescriptions.
Okay.
And it worked out real nice. But I was telling you about Shapiro's. He sent me down every day to get him a Shapiro sandwich. Cost me a quarter, 25 cents.
Okay.
Now I understand that they're about $11.
Or no, 18.
Or more.
Yeah, they are fat.
Oh,
They're big, but they are up there. Yes.
Yeah. I had one of my classmates got a job at Shapiro's, and she was a server. Got the food together and always young people, and she was a nice girl. And anytime I'd go down there, she'd give me something a little extra. She stayed there working for many years.
All right. So how would you just this is kind of a 2-location question. How would you describe downtown then, and then how would you describe up in this area and the river?
Well, the river, I'll tell you, I was here before they built a road across the river bridge.
Where? Location?
About 8000 North, the bridge over the river.
Okay, like up Westfield.
Well, yeah.
Got it.
And I had a nurse that I was talking to early in my problems, and we used to talk about that because she used to hang out there when she was in high school with her mother and her father. They had a little cottage. You go down, you get off of Keystone, you go down River Road, and you go down a steep hill, and she was in that first cottage, and I used to stay in the second cottage because a friend of mine from high school, his mother owned this second cottage, but you get flooded though. The house we had lived in had stilts built up, so the upstairs didn't get flooded. But
Were there a lot of houses on the river at that point, or just a few? Four.
Yeah. Then I had a good attorney friend that lived on the other side of the river, and I used to go visit with him because he was interested in cars, new cars or used cars, and I'd like to see him working on his cars. And I'd go up there, and he had a couple of cars, and eventually I bought a high-priced Cadillac used. But it was a nice Cadillac. No, it wasn't a Cadillac. It was, I think it probably was. And I was trying to buy a used car from a customer of mine up in north of town. And I looked at one car for about 3 or 4 visits. He was a collector of everything. He had every kind of imaginable car. And I kept looking at the car. And I thought, I'm finally going to tell him I'll buy it. Then I got ready to buy it. He said, my God, I sold that car about a week ago. It's gone. I was really mad. I liked that car. And he said, well, I got one over here I'll make you a special deal on. And I think it was Rolls Royce. It was a Rolls Royce. And he said it belonged to a doctor up in Elkhart. And he passed away, and his wife wanted me to get rid of the car. So I talked to the guy that owned it. He said, a good friend of mine, I had sold him some equipment. He said, I'll tell you, he says, I won't send you a bill. I just want you to send, I bought it for, I think, about $1,800. I just want you to send my church a check for $1,800. And I said, fine.
You made a donation and got a Rolls Royce. And how were you in your 20s, or how old were you at this?
Yeah.
In your 20s at this point?
Late 20s.
Late 20s. Okay. All right. So before we're gonna do different segments. So this is gonna kind of be the end of the first segment. We're gonna talk about you going into Purdue and then going into military in this next segment.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna pause this out. Thank you for sharing everything you've done so far. It's been great, but we're gonna get a lot more.